Welcome everybody. My name is Carl Soule, and really excited to show you a lot of the improvements and enhancements that are coming to the Creative Cloud tools for virtual reality and immersive experiences. Now, for those of you who have been following the news with the Adobe tools, you'll know that we announced in a press release a couple months ago that the Metal Skybox tools, which were plugins for Premiere Pro and After Effects, have now been acquired by Adobe, and these are being integrated into tools like Premiere and After Effects. So we have a number of tools that are brand new to Creative Cloud for anybody dealing with shooting VR 360 immersive video. We've actually added Chris Bobatis, who came over from Metal, has joined Adobe and is now our Director of Immersive Experiences. So we're really excited to continue down the path of leading the industry with VR 360 editorial tools. And I got a lot to show you today. But after you see what I'm about to show you, you're also probably going to want to experience some of what I can only show you on a flat screen here. We've got some interesting things that actually involve using a headset, such as the Oculus Rift or Vive, HTC Vive. We're doing some demos around the back of the booth where you can actually put the headset on and actually see what this looks like inside the headset. Okay, to get started, I want to start over in Adobe Premiere, and we've been doing a lot as far as supporting 360 and VR directly inside of Premiere. Here I've got a series of some different clips here, and we're currently viewing these in one of the most common formats, what we call equirectangular view inside of Premiere. Now, we've already had for a couple of versions now the ability to actually toggle a VR display and start to actually see this as we would inside of a headset and pan around. Use controls here. I can turn on the VR video controls. If I just want to do a flat pan left to right, I can use this little wheel here to kind of see what my VR video will look like. And this even works while the video is playing back. I can see exactly what's going on, kind of follow this guy around over on this side here. So this is nothing new. We are enhancing this somewhat. We're doing a lot to try and provide an experience that more closely matches what is inside of a typical VR headset. So you'll notice that I'm currently using kind of a square view here. This is something that's coming in automatically here. I can go into settings and make changes to this, but we're trying to give you more of an experience of what is going to be visible as you're panning around and looking inside of these different headsets. Another thing that you'll notice inside of Premiere is that if I go in and try and create a new sequence, you will see a new folder for VR sequences, and we now have specific presets going all the way up to 8K by 4K when you are creating VR content for these various headsets. As we talk to people in the industry, particularly when you start working with stereoscopic content, a lot of people want to create content. They say the sweet spot is really going to be something the headsets don't currently do today, but where the technology is going to really take off is when we can do 8K per eye. So if you thought 4K was enough, you didn't think there was ever any reason to shoot higher resolution than that, VR and 360 video is definitely one of those that it's going to continue to push the raster sizes, and we already can support a lot of these different formats, and we can create sequences that match these different formats. Now, from an editorial perspective, once you start to tell a story in 360 video, there are some challenges that we run into. If you're looking at the original equirectangular display, again, it can be very difficult to really tell what's going on here unless you can actually see it in the proper view. But the other challenge that equirectangular footage provides is if we're trying to do something artistic, we're trying to do things like sharpen the video, we want to use some sort of a glow effect, we want to blur the video, the edges can create a bit of a challenge. When I wrap this into a 360 sphere and start to look around, we don't want to see seams. We don't want to see an edge where that is being connected as it's being projected into this spherical view. In order to make sure that this was consistent, we needed to have a series of special effects that took this into account. So something new coming to Premiere for people doing 360 video, there's a new immersive video folder of effects that we can work with. These are all GPU accelerated effects designed specifically around 360 video. These include things like blur, fractal noise. These also include some effects that are very, very necessary in order to tell the story that we want to tell. When I'm looking at this, what is in the exact dead center of the image, that is kind of my the point that I'm going to be looking at when I first put the headset on. That's sort of my 0 point of where I'm going to be looking. So in this case, I'm looking, I can kind of see, you know, the piazzas over on the right a little bit. I've got the two boats. I'm kind of looking between the two boats. If I want to change that starting position, I need to be able to move this around appropriately. And so we have an effect now. I can go ahead and add here called Rotate Sphere. And when I add this in, I now have controls that do the right thing as far as setting where that 0 point is. So maybe I want it centered more on this boat. So I'm kind of looking into the sun. Maybe I want to tilt this up or down a little bit. You can see that this actually is doing some very complex math as far as, you know, scaling and skewing this around in order to do the right thing when I'm in my 360 view mode. But now that is my new starting point. That is going to be centered in the headset when I put the headset on. That is going to be what's directly in front of me. Some other examples, if I wanted to blur this, if I use a standard blur effect, I would most likely start to see the edge pixels. So the pixels around the edge of the frame would start to distort in a way that would become really noticeable. Now we have a VR blur effect that if I add this in, it actually does the right thing around the edges in such a way that if I am in the headset, if I'm using this as a transitional effect, or if I'm using this to kind of, you know, subtly move out of one image and into another, I'm not going to see the edge pixels creating kind of a hard border or a line in the shot. So a bunch of new effects, GPU accelerated, designed to run on large raster images like what we're dealing with here, you know, 4K, 8K, really it just whatever you might want to work with. All right. That's the immersive video effects. The other thing that we also need are transitional effects. And this is a really, really delicate thing to deal with when you're looking inside of a headset. So I'm just going to get rid of this VR blur effect. We'll keep the rotate sphere on for now. Now, when I move from one environment to another, a hard transition when you're in virtual reality is a little bit jarring. But even more jarring is to try and do something where, you know, the image spins around. You know, there's things that you can do with animations and stuff. You know, definitely less is more when we start talking about 360 production. But we wanted to be able to do some really cool things to transition from one virtual environment into another virtual environment. So there are now a whole series of different transitional effects in a new folder called Immersive Video, where I can transition from one clip to another in different interesting ways. So just as a couple of examples here, here's one called VR Chroma Leaks. I can just take this and drag it and drop it. Actually, before I do that, this will actually go through and give me, let me just do a quick edit here. Take that off. I'll just do a little bit of a trim on this clip here, a little trim on this clip here, just give me a couple of extra frames to work with. And I'll drag and drop that on there. Let me just zoom in a little bit so we can see that well. There we go. So this is actually adding a kind of a light transition. We're using luminance values to create sort of a light leak effect to transport myself from one location to another. If we see that in the equirectangular view, you can actually see we're starting with the sun there, and the sun gets brighter, and this transitions over to my other shot. Now I can see and start to think about some interesting production tricks that I might want to use to kind of combine the two of these. Here the sun is slightly off center. It was dead center the way I set it up in the first one. So now I can try and think about what is the best way to transition from one shot to the other that's going to be the least jarring on the person who's actually viewing this in the headset. So what I could do to match this is take the rotate sphere effect, put it on the second clip, and then just pan this over a little bit so that the sun is roughly in the same position as it was here. And we might use a little bit of a tilt, just bring it up slightly. And so that sun actually starts to become sort of a reference point, and that's going to do things, it's going to prevent the viewer from feeling ill from transitioning from one scene to another. There's a whole series of these to play around with, chroma leaks, gradient wipe, spherical blur, random blocks kind of makes one reality sort of disappear in pixels, and then another reality appears and fills in the gaps. So a lot of different things to play around with now if you're working with 360 video. Now audio is also a first-class citizen when it comes to VR 360 workflows. Immersive experiences having audio that actually follows the headset is an important part of the overall experience. It really helps to sell the idea that I'm in a different reality. And so Premiere Pro actually supports Ambisonic audio. So I have the ability to choose to monitor the ambisonics, and if I'm working with ambisonic audio, ambisonic audio is traditionally a 4-channel audio clip, and I can drag and drop that into my timeline, see 4 channels of audio, and anytime I create a sequence, if I'm working with VR and I'm working with ambisonics, I can actually create an ambisonic timeline. And this has some special notes in here saying if you're going to use this, ensure that multi-channel monomedia default audio track options is set to adaptive. Okay, so I can create a sequence that will work with ambisonic audio, and our export options also include the ability to work with ambisonic audio and export out, so that if I'm publishing this to places like Facebook or YouTube, ambisonic audio will be supported. What ambisonic audio basically means is if somebody is talking to me and they're standing over on this side, I would hear it in this ear. If I turn the headset to look at them, it would suddenly be in both ears. And so that automatic locking to this, we introduced ambisonic audio in a release last year, but we're adding the ability now, if I have the VR viewer turned on and I have monitor ambisonics turned on, it will actually follow as I'm panning around the headset here, so I can double check and make sure that the spheres are actually aligned, so the audio sphere and the video sphere line up, so that if someone's talking over here and I turn and look at them, then the sound will be coming from the same location. Now, the last thing in Premiere that I want to touch on is the coolest feature, and sadly it's something that I can't really show you here today because you guys are watching me demonstrate this on a projector screen. This last bit is something that is necessary when you're getting to that last stage of editing where you've cut things together, you've added titles and graphics, but now you're trying to kind of get a real feeling for what this is going to feel like inside the headset. Really, the only way to do that is to put on the headset. But this creates a problem in traditional viewing because I've got all my timeline controls here on my computer screen, and then I'm wearing the headset watching the video, but how do I control the changes and the edits that I want to make while I'm wearing this in the headset? We're introducing a new immersive editing experience inside of Premiere Pro. If you're using a headset like an Oculus or an HTC Vive, you'll be able to use the hand controls and wear the headset to actually do editing inside of the headset. What we are watching here right now is, this is a Premiere Pro timeline. This is a flat representation of what you would be seeing inside of the headset while you're doing the editing. Now, right now we're using the two controls to just kind of move backwards and forwards at different speeds. Now we're using the controls with these little laser pointer controls where we can actually pick out clips and we can scrub the timeline back and forth without having to keep taking the headset off every time we want to make these minor changes. So if you're looking at this going, I don't know about this, check it out. We have a working version of this around the corner. Definitely worth seeing. It is believing in it. It really makes a difference. In particular, again, I probably would not start editing stuff and adding clips to my timeline when I'm doing this, but when I'm telling a narrative story, having it in the headset and having this heads-up display sequence kind of floating in my view definitely gives me the ability to go in and make the changes necessary in editorial to really convincingly tell the story. So big commitment from Adobe to provide editorial tools for immersive experiences. Okay, moving on to After Effects. After Effects also has a number of new tools that give me the capability of fixing issues, modifying things. The biggest thing we see people using After Effects for in VR and 360, rig removal. Being able to track out or mask out the rig that's being used to do the recording. Another thing that we also see is stabilization, using After Effects to do stabilization. So we now have a complete toolkit built right inside of After Effects for being able to do these different things. We also have added the capability of creating a 3D sphere so that you get that immersive experience out of something where you're just using X, Y, and Z depth and you've built out kind of a camera and a 3D environment. You now have a simple converter tool that can convert something that was created in, let's say, Cinema 4D. You could now actually convert that into this equirectangular view and export it out for different headsets. So a couple of quick things that I can show you in here. One of the first things is if I'm working with a piece of video like this, I have the ability to come in and extract what's called a cube map out of this particular scene here. We'll go ahead and I've got some controls here on what resolution I want to use, whether I'm using 3D plugins on my video. And this goes through under the hood, and I can go ahead and close this panel out. And this actually gives me something. Let's go into a custom camera view here. This has taken that equirectangular video and given me something called a cube map. And I can come in here to my camera and kind of rotate and look at this at different angles. Now, why is this important? Why is a cube map something that is useful? The perspective on each face of the cube is accurate. If something is moving from the bottom of the screen to the top of the screen, it's not going to distort like it would in the equirectangular view. If I need to track an object, if I want to track in some motion graphics, using a cube map, very, very common workflow. If you want to see the entire cube, I can just double click on one of these layers here and just kind of show it to you. So this has taken that equirectangular view with the distortions in the top, bottom, and it's actually kind of flattened this out. Think of taking like a paper six-sided dice and kind of opening it up and flattening it out. That's basically what we're seeing here today. So this gives me a flattened view that I can easily go in and do use tracking tools to do motion tracking, rig removal, and so on. Now, another tool that's been added into After Effects, I'll just go ahead and take one of these shots here, just drag it into a new composition, is the VR converter. Now I'm going to go ahead and bring in the effect. You can see here are the same controls and the same rotation effects that we have over in Premiere Pro also exist over here. We have a new effect called the VR converter. Now, the reason for having a VR converter, the VR converter lets me quickly take something that's in equirectangular view and convert it into the specialty formats used on Facebook. If I need a spherical view, if I need, there's a whole slew of different conversion options in there. So if my video is being stored in something other than equirectangular view and I need to convert it, there's a converter that's built into After Effects as well. Now I can also take equirectangular footage and add what we call a 3D edit to it. We have this new panel called the comp editor, and this lets me very quickly take the comp that I'm working on. I can set my viewing options here, what aspect ratio I want to be looking at this. I've also got a series of options in here as far as my camera control is concerned, and I can add this as a specialty edit. I'll go into my active camera here, and now I can actually, I've got my pan around view that I can be working on. You can see here are the controls for actually moving and toggling back and forth. So in this view, I could start to add titles or graphics to my video. I can still play this, I can still view this, and now I'm kind of seeing it in this sort of, pseudo headset view. And from here, I can start to even add additional properties to this. So this is where I can go in and start to add tracking options. I can also choose to stabilize the footage simply by doing one click. This will go through and start to offer stabilization on my layers. Very useful if you have 360 drone footage and you just need to get rid of some of the unwanted motion in the shots. At any point in the process, once I've created this edit point, I can toggle back and forth between the original output file and that exact edit view that I was just working with using the new VR comp editor panel. I now have this capability. So the whole idea is all of these different tools are now native directly inside the software. Whether I'm working in After Effects or in Adobe Premiere, I have the ability to come in and choose to export this out. And of course, we support formats using things like HEVC or H.264. We now have options so that I can make sure that this is tagged properly as VR video. So when I upload this, if I publish this to social sites, places like YouTube, it'll be recognized automatically as VR video. For the pan around experience or the camera, if you've ever held your phone up to kind of watch a 360 video, you have that capability. But then again, we're also working with the various headset manufacturers so that you'll be able to output this directly into the various headsets for viewing options. So immersive experiences is a big part of the future at Adobe. We're really, really excited to have Chris on the team as the new director of immersive experiences, and really, really excited about this release for VR. Thank you guys for watching.